I'm Amanda Salov, and I have the pleasure of introducing the speaker today. Born and raised in Brazil, Ani holds degrees in architecture and urban planning. She worked as an architect until 2007 when she moved to New York City. While studying jewelry at the 92nd Y, Ani had the idea to sell on Etsy. While researching, she came across a job posting at Etsy. For the next 7 years, Ani held roles in communication, policy, education, and community management at Etsy. She was also the first senior maker specialist. In 2017, she quit and moved to Seattle, where she focuses on her studio practice in clay and metal. About 6 months ago, Ani asked me to introduce her for this talk. I opened an Etsy shop and realized there's lots to learn. I hope you are as excited and eager as I am. We are so lucky to get this insider view. Please join me in a warm welcoming for the brilliant, very knowledgeable, smart, all-knowing Etsy guru, pro Etsy, put together, shapeshifter, life changer, smart, Any Guelmann.
Ooh, expectations. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I want to give you an idea of what the presentation is going to look like. I'm going to be talking very fast because there's a lot, so sometimes I have to take a break to breathe. But I'm going to be talking about the platform of Etsy as it relates to maybe you deciding whether it's a good place to build your business or how to make it work if you already have an Etsy shop. And I'll do that from the point of view of the potential that Etsy has, what it does well for the sellers, and also the challenges that sellers find. And always do that from my perspective as someone who was in there for so long and got to see how thousands of sellers did all their successes and their struggles. I do need to get the legal, pardon me? Is this better? Okay. I need to get the legal stuff out of the way, so I'll give you 5 minutes to read it. I just need to say that I am no longer affiliated with Etsy. The stock is not endorsed by Etsy, and I don't speak on their behalf. And everything that I'm going to say is based on my own experiences and my own opinions. Okay, we're ready to go. A little bit more detail about how I ended up here. My first job at Etsy was as a community manager, mainly working with sellers in the Etsy forums. Was anyone here ever in the Etsy forums? Okay, a few people. If you were there between 2010 and 2014 and you happened to maybe have a bad day and you were a little mean to the moderators, then you can just look for me after the presentation. I just want to talk. In that job, I got to interact with sellers, like seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. Most of it was good, but I could be this bridge between what the sellers needed and didn't have, or what they really liked, and the internal teams in the company, which allowed me to be a part of the conversations about how we created some tools and the policies. And I learned a lot from that. When I became a maker specialist, I was also very connected with sellers on a day-to-day basis, but more sellers that were at a later stage of the business life cycle because they were already looking for to expand their production, to grow their business. What a maker specialist is, in short, my team was in charge of learning how things are made so we could understand how things that are sold on Etsy fit within the marketplace and the policies. So it was a work that was very linked with what's allowed on the site. In 2017, I quit, and I decided to dedicate myself to ceramics full time, and that's how it's been going. The numbers really quick. Etsy has more than 2 million sellers, almost 40 million buyers, and in 2018, the number of dollars that were transacted on the site was 4 billion, almost 4 billion. So think about that number a little bit. That's $4 billion going straight from buyers to makers all over the world. And the reason I wanted to highlight these numbers specifically is that it's very common for people to say that they want to sell on Etsy, but it's so big and so intimidating and so hard to stand out. And it's true, because there's more than 2 million sellers, but look at how many buyers, and look at how much money those buyers are spending. There's more than enough room for you to grow your business. Some ceramic numbers. I don't have access to the numbers anymore, obviously, but I did some searches on the site to try to get an idea. So there are, if you look for handmade pottery mugs, there are 41,000 listed on Etsy. Looking at the overall like handmade ceramics listings, there are 581,000. Honing it down to handmade pottery, there are 247,000 items listed. Just for fun, I decided to look what was the most expensive mug listed on Etsy, and it's this chino glaze mug that's listed for $500. It's Santito's Cocina Shop, and I'm totally here for it. I believe in him. He is in on the joke. The first sentence of his description is, "Not for everyone." I agree, and I love it. I don't really have to tell you that ceramics are trending on Etsy and elsewhere. They have been trending for a while now. These are some things that I have seen on Etsy that I really like. I've been seeing a lot of match strikers, coffee pour-overs all over the place. Planters are super popular. Hanging planters are super popular, and things with faces are very popular, pots with faces. So that little guy is like a 3-time winner. And then there's a lot of porcelain jewelry, which I have been exploring myself. Porcelain jewelry has always been around. For a long time, it was a lot about making beads, and I've been seeing a lot of really creative work with jewelry, with porcelain and jewelry. A few weeks ago, I decided to send out a survey to ceramic artists who are already selling on Etsy or who had sold on Etsy. And these are some of the things that I learned from the survey. So 60% of responders said that they are full-time clay artists, get all of their income from selling their work. 57% sell in markets and galleries. 28% sell through their own website. 60% actually said that they have a website outside of Etsy, but only 28% have an e-commerce option on their site. 32% get more than half or all of their business from Etsy. 35% are active in a local guild or association, and 90% are on Facebook or Instagram. That number surprised me only because it's not 100%. And speaking of surprises, 4 people who answered to my survey said they are not familiar with Twitter. And those are the 4 happiest people in America, and they answered to my survey. It's like #blessed. 23% of people said they are not happy with Etsy. 35% are okay, there's good and there's bad. 42% are happy or very happy. There's some themes that keep coming up when people talk about what they love about Etsy. One very big one, very hard to beat, is the low fees. Etsy charges you 20 cents to list an item for 4 months. Once it sells, Etsy's commission is 5%, and then you pay a fee over the payment processing, which is like basically the credit card swipe, and that's 25 cents plus 3%. That's all very reasonable. Etsy has a seller app, so it's an app that is separate from the shopping app. It's an app just for sellers. I don't think it has all the functionality that it could have, but it's pretty cool. You can manage your orders, you can list items from the app, and it integrates with Square, so you can use the Square reader, and you can sell from your Etsy shop in person, which means that if you have a high volume of sales, like on Etsy and at a market, for example, all of the financial information stays in the same place, which can be really helpful for taxes and all of that. Etsy has a shipping label tool, so you can print shipping labels from your Etsy seller dashboard. All of the information from the order gets auto-populated to the shipping label, and you can pay for postage right there. It's a little cheaper than buying it straight from the post office. It's really good. It works really well, this tool. I've used it many times. Analytics. So Etsy has a little tool that looks at the data from your shop and gives you like very concise, very helpful information such as how much are you selling year over year, how are your items doing in terms of views. And my favorite part, if you select one item from your shop, the tool will give you what are the words that people type in search that brought them to this specific item, and also where did they come from? Are they on Google or Pinterest or from Etsy search? And that's really important when you're trying to figure out search, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The Etsy community is a big item when people talk about how happy they are with Etsy. It's a very helpful community. I was in it for very long, and I got to see how there are so many experienced Etsy sellers that know so much, and they're hanging out in the Etsy forums waiting for people to come up with questions that they can answer. It's really awesome. And then there are buyers all over the world. So many people say that they are now like shipping their items to Australia and to South America. There are Etsy buyers and sellers in more than 200 countries in the world. And out of every 3 transactions, one has at least one person outside of the US, if not both. But the good stuff is really easy, right? The good stuff works, the good stuff people like, the information is out there. I think our time here is better spent talking about the challenges and try to unpack the things that people struggle with. The first one is search. This came up in 80% of the responses to my survey. 80% of people said that's something they struggle with. Search is a science. There are people who make money from figuring out search. So, I'm not going to teach you everything here, but I wanted to try to make it less complicated for you and to break it down into 2 steps that you need to figure out if you want to make search work for you. And they are getting found and getting clicked. So, getting found, you need to appear in search results. If you've ever heard of SEO, search engine optimization, that's what it is. You need to figure out how the search engine works and what do you need to do so that your listing will come up. And search engines are powered by words. So this is basically a game of figuring out the right keywords. It is not that simple, but I said I was going to oversimplify it, so it's keywords. So let's say you did that right, okay? You got found. Someone did a search for handmade mug, and your mug is there. By the way, I'm going to use mugs as the example throughout the presentation, but you can just apply what I'm saying to whatever it is that you make. So someone looked for mugs, your mug is there. What it looks like is an entire page on Etsy full of little pictures of mugs. So that's great, your first job is done. Now, what's going to catch the shopper's eye? What's going to make them click on your mug? And that is good photography. Any amount of time that you invest in learning photography is valuable because good photography is going to be important all over the internet. I don't even need to say that. You just need good photography. This is, again, it's not this simple, but these 2 steps are a good place for you to start. There really is no secret sauce. It just takes a lot of time. And the way I think that you should try experimenting with figuring out search is by doing tests and using the analytics tool that I mentioned to see how those tests are doing. There's a lot of information about search out there. One of the most valuable places is the Etsy Seller Handbook. That's a collection of articles that are free and open. You don't even need an Etsy account to access. And they go everything from like pricing our item to marketing to like figuring out how search works and photography. So I highly recommend that as a resource for everyone. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more complicated and complex. if you're building your business on Etsy, you are basically playing on someone else's sandbox. You get to control your business, you get to build your own little sandcastle, you don't control the sandbox. And that can be kind of a problem. Think about this. If you build a business that depends on Etsy, Etsy is not the problem. Your business model is the problem. That's something for you to keep in mind if you plan on building a real business online. So the idea, when I say this, you're probably thinking, well, maybe I should build my own website then, and think about investing my time on my own website, which I have full control over. Just to play devil's advocate, keep in mind that if it's your own website, you also own, oh, hi, I've been expecting you. If it's your, I really have. If it's your own website, you own the problems too, which means, for example, if someone is having trouble making Etsy work, making the site work, let's say they can't make their credit card work, or they're having some kind of technical difficulty. If it's on your own website, you don't have the help of Etsy's customer support. You're either there to fix that problem or you lose a sale. But still, let's talk about one of the more obvious ways in which a lack of control can impact you, which is in customization. You have an Etsy shop, you can have a really nice banner, you can have beautiful photography that create like a really cohesive branding on your shop, but your Etsy shop is always going to look like an Etsy shop. Your shopper, Etsy's customer. If you happen to listen to my interview for the Potter's Cast with Paul Blaze, that's one of his biggest gripes with Etsy, that when someone buys something from you on Etsy, they are Etsy's customers, and that is completely fair. If that's something that you want to focus on, if you're looking to build a customer base, then you need to keep that in mind. If you sell something to someone at a market, they're your customer. If they buy the same mug at a gallery, they are the gallery's customer. That also impacts the ways in which you can use buyer information. If someone buys on Etsy, you're going to see all of their information, email, address, but Etsy has very strict rules about how you can use that information. You cannot simply use that email to send follow-up marketing emails, for example, which is kind of a deterrent, but again, playing devil's advocate, buyers like that there's that kind of control over their information on the internet. So it's possible that there are some buyers out there who actually feel safer buying from an Etsy shop than they would from your standalone site, for example. Now, more philosophical aspect, the decision-making power. You don't get to steer the ship if you're selling on Etsy, and that could be super concrete stuff, practical stuff, like tools that you need that maybe don't get built, or tools that you use that get changed and really get in your way, but also like big picture things like Etsy's mission, the company's values, what is the future of the marketplace, where's leadership going to be focusing on. That stuff can impact your business. In fact, one way in which it has been impacting people is the issue of free shipping. So about 2 years ago, Etsy's leadership changed. The new CEO has been focusing a lot on attracting more buyers to the marketplace, which is fantastic. I have no problem with the reasoning behind that, and not even like the overall strategy. I just don't like the way they are going about implementing that. One of the ways they're doing that is highlighting bestsellers. So on a search results page, you might see a little banner next to some items that says bestseller. The reasoning is great. If you're attracting more people to Etsy, you're getting a bunch of new buyers, and it's very, very, very important to ensure that people have a great first experience at Etsy. People who have a bad first experience are very unlikely to ever come back. So it makes sense that you want to highlight best sellers, because chances are, if they're buying a best-selling item, they're going to have a good experience. That's great. But the thing is, like, it's small on the top, and if you keep highlighting the people who are already on the top, what happens to other people who want to get there too? The other issue is discounted items. Search results now also highlight items that are for sale. And again, I understand we don't have to even discuss the appeal of getting a deal, but I don't like the race to the bottom mentality. I think that Etsy did a very good job for many years educating buyers in, handmade costs more and it takes longer, and that's the way it is. And it really concerns me that this kind of approach could undermine that or undo all of that work. And then we get to the matter of free shipping. So free shipping is great depending on what you sell. If you sell $40 earrings and you want to offer free shipping to stay more competitive, maybe you raise your price to $43, $45. It's not a big jump in price. You're still in the same bracket. You might take a hit, a couple of dollars of your profit, but now you're offering free shipping, so you have that advantage. If you sell a $40 mug, what do? Do you change the price to $55? Now you're in a completely different price point. Or how big a hit can you take in your profit to offer free shipping? So it's really hard when the nature of your product, which is like heavy and breakable, gets in the way of you offering that. Etsy's focusing on free shipping so much that there's actually a video of the new CEO instructing people to offer free shipping. It's just hard for us to do that and stay competitive, especially with regards to other categories that people might be looking at.
I'm sorry, when you had discounted items, did that mean that Etsy would be discounting your items?
No. So he asked if discounted items mean that Etsy discounts your items. No, you choose that. You choose to put an item on sale, and that gets highlighted on search results. Yeah. No, you don't. You don't have to offer free shipping. But if you do, it shows up in search results. People, when they search, they will see the items that do offer free shipping. So let's talk about competition. The most obvious way to think about competition is pricing, right? Every mug that exists on Etsy has one thing in common, which is they have a price. Well, hopefully they hold liquid too. That's a good thing to have in common, but you have a mug that you made, it has a price, and you're kind of looking around, trying to figure out what other mugs cost. You want to find that sweet spot where you're charging a price that is fair in relation to your skill level, the quality of the mug, that's advantageous to you, and that it's something that someone is willing to pay. But there's a bigger issue with competition on Etsy, which is the definition of handmade. And I love talking about the definition of handmade. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty here, but I love arguing about it. So if you want to do that, you can find me outside right after I talk to the forums people, and we can talk about this. But the thing that matters here is, if a mug is considered by Etsy, per Etsy's rules, as being handmade, it's going to be in the same overall category as your mug and any other mug that's considered handmade. If someone made a mug out of dog hair, and Etsy's like, okay, it's handmade, dog hair mug and your ceramic mug are in the same category. And I understand that that doesn't even make sense, because these things, like, how is that even possible? They're not even the same thing. But I'll tell you about how categories work on Etsy. So as of 4 years ago, when the taxonomy of the site changed, Etsy doesn't have a ceramics or a pottery category anymore. What it has is a mugs category, for example. That's a screenshot. So if you sell a mug, dog hair mug, ceramic mug, it's going to be under drinkware, under drink and barware, which is in the kitchen and dining category, under the overall home and living category. And that gets really confusing because all mugs are not created equal, but that's because the way categories work on Etsy is a category is what a thing is. It's not how a thing is made or what it's made of. A mug is a mug. Ceramics are a material, what a thing is made of. Pottery is a technique, how a thing is made. That doesn't count for categories. And that can get really exasperating because you know your buyer, you know how people shop. Like your buyer is looking for ceramics. How come there's no ceramics category? And that's because you know your buyer and you know how your buyer shops. That's not necessarily how every buyer shops. And Etsy needs to optimize for the majority. So let's look at the majority. Let's say this is all the universe of people who come to Etsy because they need a mug. Within that universe, there's a group of people who are maybe looking for a cheaper mug, let's say a $12 mug. No judgment. I'm kidding, of course I'm judging. But okay, some of the people who look for mugs are looking for that. There's also people on Etsy who value handmade, who know, appreciate, and are looking for handmade ceramics. Now, there's an overlap there, of course, and if you are in the overall mugs category, you know, there's a chance that you might convert someone who comes to the mugs category, not sure what they're looking for, they might, you know, I mean, maybe someone who's willing to pay $12 for a mug might fall in love with your mug and pay $40 for it. It's possible, but it's unlikely. That's not the point. Even though you're in the same category, that's the buyer you need to focus on. That's your buyer. And you need to trust that if they are looking at the mugs category and they're not finding what they like, they are going to refine that search result by typing in words that make the results more relevant to them, which is, again, why it's so important for you to understand how search works, so that you cater to the people who are on Etsy looking for what you're selling. And I want to stay on the topic of your buyer a little bit more, because this is important. It will really benefit your business if you figure out who your buyer is. And I know that's a little abstract and it's a little daunting because, like, people with money to spend, that's who my buyer is. That's pretty obvious. But there are two questions that you can ask yourself. How are buyers finding you, and where are they coming from? Do you already have a customer base out there? People who are coming to Etsy because they know you. Maybe they know you from Instagram. Maybe they know you from your community. They are coming to Etsy because they want to buy from you. Or are you looking for Etsy to be the source of your customers? Are you looking to build a customer base from within Etsy? Because if that is the case, then Etsy is a marketplace, and everything that we just talked about, search especially, and photography, that's all important because you want to get buyers from the Etsy marketplace. But maybe if you already have an established career and you already have buyers out there, Etsy could be just a tool for you. Basically, a shopping cart, essentially. Take a look at these Etsy sellers. They're all very accomplished ceramic artists. They all have their work for sale right here at Etsycom or in the galleries around us. And I would be very surprised if the majority of their buyers are coming from Etsy search. They're not. These are buyers that are coming to Etsy because they want the work that these artists are making. And that is a great way to use Etsy because it's a shopping cart that is very inexpensive and has amazing, super powerful tools. So that's something for you to consider. Regardless of how you're going to use Etsy, you're going to have to deal with feedback. Etsy has a feedback system, and when someone buys from your shop, they get a chance to rate the experience from 1 to 5 stars. And one thing that you should be aware of is that Etsy doesn't mediate disputes about the accuracy of feedback. So if someone gives you a 1-star review because they thought the mug was going to be bluish and it was greenish, and they're like, 1 star, I don't like it, that may, that sucks, and it's only their opinion, and it actually might even not be a fair opinion, because maybe you said right on your listing, it's greenish, not bluish, but if they didn't read it, their feedback is just a reflection of the experience that they had. Now, if there's something shady going on, if someone, this is very rare, but it happens sometimes, like a buyer is maybe giving you a bad review because they want to try to get some money back, or, that's super shady, and that's something that you should bring to the attention of Etsy, and they will get involved with that, but not if someone gave you a bad review just because they weren't pleased. It really benefits you to think about bad feedback as something that is going to happen. Just internalize that. You don't get to decide that you're not going to get bad feedback. And actually, it's not even on Etsy. You can get bad feedback on Instagram. You can get bad feedback in person even, which is the worst, I've heard. But you do choose how you react to feedback. If I, as a buyer, if I see a listing on Etsy that has gotten a bad review, and I go look at the review, because of course you want to see what's wrong with something, and the seller replied to that negative comment in a way that's professional, kind, without even a hint of a passive-aggressive comment, please. And with the mind to solving that person's problem, even if it's not a problem that can be solved, it doesn't matter. Because when you reply to a bad review, you are not talking just to that buyer, you're talking to everyone else who's ever going to come to that listing and look at it again. So this is a trick that I learned working at Etsy. If you're replying to something negative, and while you're typing, it kind of feels good, you have that rush, you shouldn't be typing. Because you're trying to win an argument. And this is not the point. There's no argument to be won here. So you need to take a break, take the dog for a walk, take a bottle of gin for a walk, whatever you need to do, and come back when you can be more collected, more objective, and that will really, really benefit you. When I talk about reacting to people online, I always like to bring up this sentiment that I really like. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. You just don't know what's going on with people. And this is not an excuse for people being mean on the internet, but sometimes there's a reason behind it. And I can tell you, kind of like stepping back into my Etsy admin role, I got to interact with people who were maybe being a little difficult, and then later I would find out that they had lost everything. They had lost a family member. I dealt with people who I didn't know, I found out later, had lost everything to a fire. I dealt with people who passed away shortly after, and you just don't know. If you are in a position where you have the luxury of stepping back and taking a break and only coming back when you can respond from a place of kindness, that's always the right choice to make. Before we're done, well, thank you. I plan to fix Twitter next. Before we're done, huge pet peeve of mine. If you already have an Etsy shop And that's the way that you're writing out the address of your Etsy shop, maybe on your Instagram bio or on your business card. That's not the right way to do it. You need to, this is a format, a URL format that you need to use. It works, and it's there to make your URL, your business address look more elegant. It's your shopname.etsy.com. It's super easy to remember. Your shop name is right at the beginning. The other address, it's like Etsy/shop. There's like 2 slashes in the middle, and then your shop name is all the way at the end. People don't even, if they don't have that written down before them, they're never going to remember that. This is what you should be using, your shopname.etsy.com. A couple of resources. Etsy has a podcast. There are actually a ton of podcasts about Etsy. Some really, really good, but I'm really not too experienced with them, so I didn't want to recommend any of them, but I do recommend that you look for them, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to listen to podcasts while you work and all of that. But Etsy does have its own podcast. Maybe you can look through the list of episodes and see if there's something that interests you. That's the address of the seller handbook, etsy.com/seller-handbook. And again, this is from everything, like if you're having questions about how to price your items for a market or for wholesale, it doesn't have to do anything with Etsy. Look for it. I cannot recommend the Seller Handbook enough. It's a very, very powerful resource. And then some ways to find me. I'm on Instagram, that's where you can find me. The interview that I gave to the Potter's Cast, that's the number of the episode, 392. It's a fun 1 hour of me disagreeing with the host, but in a very nice way. I don't think I changed his mind, but I got to try for an hour. And then my website and my email are on these postcards here, and there's also some quotes about being an artist that I really like, so definitely take some. But I made that email for questions about Etsy. It's I have a question about Etsy at gmail.com. Pretty easy to remember. And that's all. We're done here. Thank you. Thank you. We have time for maybe 3 or 4 softball questions. Oh, you, if possible, please use the mic here if you have any questions. Or I can try to repeat them.
So you,
Closer, please.
in 2017, you said that you quit Etsy. Do you still use it to sell your work currently?
Great question. No. I have been an Etsy seller for a very long time. I started in 2006 when Etsy was just 1 year old. But back then, I was living in Brazil, and it was very hard to sell on Etsy from Brazil. It was very hard to get your money out of your Etsy account, so I stopped. Once I started working at Etsy again, I set up my shop again, and I had, I don't know, like a little under 100 sales maybe, so I do sell. But it was very hard to sell on Etsy when you worked at Etsy. Like very few people manage to make it, to make that work. You just don't have time. And what I have been exploring, this is actually an option that I forgot to mention. If you have an established career as a ceramic artist and you're kind of looking for a way to sell some stuff, to get some income going, that's not necessarily related to your career as an artist, you can always have an Etsy shop on the side. It might even have a different name. It can be like your little side business. And that's something that you should definitely explore. I'm trying to kind of. Cool? Sure? Yes.
Hi. I used to use the forums religiously, and I actually made a lot of sales and
Through the
generated
forums?
through the forums. And ever since they updated the forums, it's not compatible with Firefox anymore.
Really?
You can't reply. I have to go into Chrome if I want to reply. And I conduct all my business on Firefox. They don't seem to be taking it seriously. Is this something that I should just give up?
And that's a good question. So first I want to clarify that I was already gone when they made that change. But it's still my team, my former team, and I was surprised when I saw the changes as now a member of the community. I found it confusing, but I also know that a lot of things that change, it just takes a while for you to get used to them. Right. It doesn't seem like people are getting used to the new forums. I don't know what's going to change, if it's going to change. I can tell you, like, very honestly, that the people who work at Etsy are very good, they're very engaged, and they don't like when people don't like something and they just cannot do anything about it. So it's not like, anyone is being ignored. I just don't know what's going to be possible.
Because my views and traffic have plummeted.
Really?
Like, I get 0 or 1. And and I used to get in the 40s and whatever. So
what I'm hearing is that a lot of people are transferring their forums interactions to Facebook groups.
Okay.
I keep hearing that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe
Thank
that's
you.
something for you to explore. Sure.
Hi there. First
Hi.
of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming and talking. This
Thank
was
you.
really wonderful. I was more active on Etsy a couple years ago, and then I kind of was doing some different shows and not concentrating on it. And then I came back to Etsy, and I noticed that I think their version of handmade had changed. Because there was stuff on there that, I mean, if you put a sticker on a
Yeah.
coffee mug, I don't think that makes it handmade. So did they loosen those rules, or it kind of seemed like it was drifting away from what they meant it to be?
Yeah. So that, I actually was there for that change, and I was a part of the discussion, so you were asking the right person. So here's the thing. When the Etsy's policies were always to be handmade, something needs to be handmade by you, which is great. What we didn't expect is that was creating a ceiling that was limiting how sellers could grow. It got to a point where we would see sellers that were becoming successful and they had no quality of life, or they would get a big order for someone, or they would be featured in a blog, and literally some went out of business because they couldn't keep up with it because everything had to be made by them. So we looked at, okay, if our objective is to give an alternative to the economy, it doesn't make sense to tell people that there's a limit to how much they can grow. So they would either break the policies because they had to, or they would leave Etsy completely, or they would just not be able to keep up and close. The change that we made was we had to come up with a different definition for handmade. There was no way around it. And I could ask 100 people for their exact definition of handmade, and it's going to be, the line will be drawn in a different point. In fact, if someone takes a mug, white, mass-produced mug, and they write down some funny sentence on the computer, and they print it out on one of those vinyl cutting machines, and they slap it on the mug, that's considered handmade because it's a mug that didn't exist before and they made it. Now, if you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and you take someone who harvests their own wild clay, made glaze recipes that they mix themselves, then they throw the mug, they wood fire it for 3 months. Maybe for them, the mug that I make isn't even that handmade. So we're all going to disagree on where handmade starts. Etsy had to make a choice, and that's where we drew the line. The line was drawn on authorship and responsibility over the production. So you had to show us that you created what you were selling, that's your concept, your idea, and that you were responsible and connected to the way it was made. So if you design a t-shirt and you create a drawing, you have authorship over that design. And if you have someone else print it, even if it's someone in a different country, you need to show us that you have a connection, you know who those people are, you know under which conditions the t-shirt is being produced, and we might accept that as handmade. That's the theory of it. I see a lot of things on Etsy that people don't think are handmade that I actually know to be handmade. It's not everything. So I'm not saying there isn't an issue. I think that there is, but it's more an issue of enforcing than of the policy itself, because the new policy does allow for more ways of production. Sure.
Okay, I think I'm last.
Yes.
So you said it's Etsy's customer. So how do you recommend that we cultivate that customer on Etsy through combos, through favorites, through incentives after the shopping experience, so that we can create relationships with that Etsy customer?
So all three things that you mentioned are a no. You're not allowed to send them convos after they bought from you just to follow up. You're not allowed to use their information to send discount codes, and you're not allowed to, there's basically a lot of restrictions. What I recommend is everywhere in your shop, like in your banner, in your announcement, in your invoice, everywhere you can have buyers read about your shop, add something about signing up to your newsletter. If buyers willingly sign up for your newsletter, they are giving you their email address and they are allowing you to use that for marketing or for a newsletter outside of Etsy. Other than that, there really isn't a whole lot you can do to build this relationship just within Etsy. Okay? Okay, we're done. Thank you.